Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Warrant Committee, January 31st, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please conduct our roll call attendance?
Sure, we have Dave Humphreys, Emily Cavalier, JJ O'Connor is on Zoom, Steve Geister, Christine Coshiel, Lorraine D., Thomas Caldwell, Lori Connolly, Alice Gagnon, Jareen Langley is on Zoom, Amanda Serio, Stephen Rhines, and Jade Funley. And we understand Judy's trying to get on Zoom.
Thank you. So we have some agenda items. The big item for tonight is going to be to meet with the school committee, budget committee, to go over their proposed budget for fiscal year 2024. We have received, each of us, copies of their budget. It's extensive. So we'll have their presentation tonight. Now, and I apologize not to waste anyone's time, but there was a little disconnect between us and them. We thought the meeting was at 7. They thought the meeting was at 7:30. So we expect for the school committee to be here for their 7:30 time. So we will get to that at or about 7:30. But we do have some housekeeping that we generally would do at the end of the formal presentation with regards to warrant committee business, specifically with regards to our annual town meeting prep, our subcommittee assignments, and to come up with our game plan for how we are going to proceed for warrant preparation going into the annual town meeting in May. Okay, so I think we'll formally kick that off. Formally, Nick, the town administrator, is prepared to give us a general overview of what FY24 budget is looking at right now. We have received at the warrant committee proposed budgets from all the departments. I sent out a link to a shared folder today that has all of those. So as we break into our subcommittees, now those budgets are available. I think our plan in this iteration is to try to have the warrant committee subcommittees reach out to the departments prior to their presentation. What we've seemed to have done in the past is get the presentation, then the warrant committee members have gone out and met with the department heads, and then as we've gone into our discussion and our votes, make a presentation at that point. We have the time, if we get going, that we could talk to the department heads prior to their presentations when they come. And, all right, so we have had some of these subcommittees are populated with volunteers, but we still have some that we need to assign, get volunteers for. So maybe I'll go through some of them. Schools.
I can share more on that.
Emily can share more on that.
That's helpful. Yeah, so I know many of you who signed up for the schools. Those of you who signed up right away when the request went out, I know I sent an email just making sure everyone knew, since Betty had encouraged attending their finance subcommittee meetings, and I know I've seen many of you there, and sometimes there have been weeks I haven't been able to make it, and you've been there, and I've heard updates, which is super helpful. So thank you to those of you who've been doing that. I think it's great background as we go into this process. And then there were a couple additions kind of after I sent out that message, so I just want to make sure, since there are quite a few of us who are looking at that budget closer, since it's a big one, I'll reach out after, because I think given the complexity and all the time constraints, we'll just want to make sure we streamline any questions and get them in writing just to make it easier for getting answers, and we just don't want to repeat questions. So I'll reach out after to make sure that we are kind of ready for our next steps for that.
When do you think you want comments from the budget from us?
I I mean, I think it would be helpful in the next week, probably just to make sure I have some time to put them together.
By Friday.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Do we meet separately, or is this just?
So
focused on it?
likely in the past, like Dave mentioned, I feel like the last couple of years have been a little different because and it's all I've experienced. So we've been meeting usually kind of one meeting with the subcommittee after to do like any follow-up needed. And so I would expect that would probably happen. Again, sometimes I think looking further to the past, those meetings happened before. But again, with timing, it seemed helpful to be able to have everyone see the full presentation now. And again, quite a few people who are going to be on the subcommittee have been going to those finance meetings, and I think getting a lot of that background. The timing for those is challenging because it's in the morning, so I think it works consistently for some, and then it doesn't work consistently for others, which is completely understandable. So would probably look at scheduling an evening because usually that's a little bit easier for everyone.
And how many people are on the committee?
I need to double check because there are quite a few people who expressed interest, and I think our view was anyone who wants to take part can take part this year. Again, since it's a big budget.
Yeah.
But with that, we just want to make sure we're not, duplicating questions because, often if one person has a question, many of us will have a question.
Same question here.
So yeah, we can make sure we put it together, keep it streamlined.
Great.
When communicating for dates, can we just let people know as soon as we are in communication with anybody from the head, especially with having so many people in the budget for school, because so that we can have as much notice as possible? Because that was a pretty turnaround from Thursday to Tuesday. So if we can, like, if there's a date, even if it's like, hey, heads up, we're planning this date, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
To know that ahead of, like, as long as ahead of time as possible.
Yeah, so I'll probably plan to put out, because these meetings would usually happen kind of outside of our regular full meeting schedule.
Yeah.
So I would probably just put out a few dates. I will say, because it would be outside of our regular meeting dates, like with the number of people we have, it might be hard to find a day that works for everybody.
No, I'm not saying that, just
Yeah.
as much notice as possible. That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that subcommittee is going to be huge. Sort of like, I think our attitude was if there was interest, as it is with any of these subcommittees, if someone has an interest, especially if somebody has any kind of relevant professional experience, get on it. Get on it, ask questions. Ultimately, the whole warrant committee is going to address all of these things. So, and then just given the size of the budget, is that more the merrier. Just play nice. So that's schools. Public safety, we had Steve Rhines and Thomas. And Steve, like, I have you down. I sent you an email. Like, I have you down. It looks like you're on schools, public safety, DPW.
I don't have a job. So.
Okay.
Kidding.
It gets too.
I didn't realize how much was involved with all these. That's my fault. It's a rookie mistake.
It's all right. So.
So are you retracting some of those?
Well, I don't know. I had to consider.
I can take on a little more if you need some help.
Yeah, I mean, we.
Because isn't DPW, that's a pretty involved one as well, I think, isn't it?
I did DPW with John Driscoll, right? And that's why I can't do DPW and consolidated facilities anymore, because it just wouldn't be the same without John. But it was not that bad. I mean, because, and we put it in the warrant last year, is DPW and consolidated facilities have sort of been handing in those year-over-year level funded budgets every year to the tune of $20 million worth of deferred work that could be done on the roads of Milton. So if you're just looking at the same budget from the year before and the year before and the year before, that wasn't a lot of heavy lifting. DPW consolidated facilities. But anyway, so we had public safety, you guys want to stick with public safety? You know, we had you guys, if we do public safety, Steve and Thomas on DPW consolidated facilities. I guess, Steve, there had been some talk about, you know, we were going to have some people keeping an eye on what was going on with the Community Preservation Act money. You had been on that?
It's fascinating to me as I coach sports in a town, and it's fascinating to me that money sits out there, and I think there's a lot of great use to that, so I'm interested in that one.
Okay, well, let's keep, I tell you what, let's keep you on these.
Yeah.
And then if, at some point, just cry uncle, and we will make a change as an,
It's fine as I can.
all right,
Thank you for pointing that out.
sure. Cemetery,
Yeah, I'll take them.
right, and you felt, you'd done in the past, you felt one person was enough?
I think Christine did it last year, and I think she did it by herself, so yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Is anybody interested in cemetery? Let's check it out. Beautiful. Jareem? Awesome. Thank you, Jareem.
Mother's there, so I definitely have an interest for that. All right.
Okay. All right. Jareem. Library, we had Judith and Jade.
Also, I'd like to do public safety.
Okay. Sure.
Thank you.
Public safety, Jareem. Library, we had Judith and JJ. Anybody interested in library?
What's up, like, what's the good number for committees? Is there one?
I'd say at least 2. 3 is fine. Like, schools is going to be the outlier,
Yeah.
right? We're just not going to feel a crush of people to work on the general government budget, right? Schools is the big one. It's Jupiter. The entire solar system organizes itself based upon the gravitational pull of this massive planet called schools. Library is interesting. We have an awesome library.
I mean, if you need somebody, I can,
All right,
I don't go there, but
Amanda.
I probably could.
You should. Everyone should go to our free and public library. We're lucky to have it.
Okay.
Maybe this will get you going there.
And
Anytime I go,
I go for meetings there.
yeah,
okay.
it's,
Yeah.
it's
But
a
I-
public space.
Yep.
They have, they're in the Old Colony Library Network,
Yep.
and they have a huge digital lending
Yep.
for people who like to use the electronics. Okay, so that's library. General government's Jay. He could use a hand.
I could.
Thank you, Jay.
No.
Anyone? Anyone?
Which one was this?
Yeah, Henny, general government.
What does that include?
All of these things.
I'll jump in with Jay on that.
All right, thank you, Jareem.
Yeah.
That's not big money.
Yeah,
That's a lot of mine.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's big.
Okay.
It's the schools here.
Park,
Julie is, I think, heading over because she's in trouble getting on the
Okay.
Zoom. So she might have more to add, but
all right.
she just couldn't.
I'm going to work with her on the community preservation. Take a look at that. Parks and Recs, we had Allison and Kristen. Is that still good?
Yeah, that's great.
All right. Insurance and retirement, we had Jay and O'Henny. Yeah.
Yep.
Now, boards and committees. O'Henny, you had done that last year, is that right?
Yes. I did it with someone. Who was it? JJ?
That's me.
Yeah, it was me.
That reason it's handy.
I don't remember who it was.
You want to do it again?
Wow.
I'm happy to do it just because I do think we should have someone who's not in the third year like me. We got to teach people how to do each one. I learned from Kathy, so I'd love to pass the board.
Okay, well, I can do it again.
I'll do it with you. I'll do it with you.
All right, thank you. And then elder services, we had Judith and JJ. JJ, do you want me to jump in on the boards and committees? And then,
Or
It's
I could
okay.
do elder services because I did that
wanna
last
do
year.
elder services?
Me and Lorraine did that together.
right,
Yeah.
fine, so it'd be Judith and Kristen. Okay, and that looks like it's it. I think we're covered. Is there anybody who,
I would love to do police and fire as well, at least
Okay.
be part of that team
Okay.
if whoever is on it.
Sure, Steve, Thomas, Jareem, and O'Henny. Yeah. Public
Once again,
safety.
just continuity.
Okay. Thank you. So those are the assignments. So I've talked with Nick, the town administrator. He is prepared to give us like a general budget brief as where he is right now on the town budget. It's evolving. He's good on Monday. Do we want to meet on Monday, this coming Monday, the 6th? He can meet on the 6th or Wednesday of the same week. Monday and Wednesdays are kind of our days. Mondays are go-to. Does that sound good, Monday?
Yeah, Monday works. for
Monday
me.
works? Okay. So we'll have, our plan would be to have Nick, and he will bring in our town accountant he would like to have. And he can give us an update on where we're at now, understanding that his budget has not yet been presented to the select board. And also, we can start to talk about warrant articles that we know will be coming to us on top of the regular warrants in the annual, for the annual town meeting. And the two big ones that we know are going to come our way is that the Giles Road project will be coming back. My sense on that one is that will be do or die. So we're gonna address that. And there's another bylaw article about digitizing and putting online and available bylaws. There'll be a decision made, do we proceed with a larger bylaw project or just go to the digitization of our bylaws? I'm not really up to speed on that right now. I'm just, sort of transmitting that we expect there's going to be a bylaws article. So it's not like we're going to get hit with residential lighting, and another fire station, and of this, and of that, and trash cans. You know what I mean? It's looks like we're going to keep it to some pretty simple things. And those are the big ones that we know are coming our way. Okay?
Are we able to start the Gala Road like before, if we don't have the budget? Like, could we get that started, at least in discussing it?
So we are going to, Mr. O'Rourke is always happy to come to us with whatever update he has. He's always very happy. So I would not be surprised if we had a presentation by Mr. O'Rourke with regards to the status. Yes, Steve?
Wasn't there a legal issue with changing the context of that land, and did that get resolved yet? And I don't know why we would spend more time on this thing until illegally it gets resolved.
Well, that might be part, I'm not privy to all of that yet because it has not come to us, but I would expect that if they were putting forward that project as a warrant article, that those legal matters would have to be, if not resolved, but addressed and with enough certainty that we could go to a formal vote at town meeting. So again, I'm not privy to those conversations, but I would expect that those questions would be answered in order to have a vote first by us and then by the citizens of the town.
Yeah, because we spent hours and hours and hours debating it, and there was never any good definity of what the legal position was.
They're going to have that figured out.
Yeah. Okay.
It's on the warrant as far as I believe that it's on the warrant. I haven't seen the article, but the select board closed the warrant and voted the articles to town meeting, so it's gonna come to us.
Okay.
And so we can ask Nick, the town administrator, when we see him, if that's part of his brief.
And legal too.
Yeah,
Right
we're gonna start with an overview on Monday.
Okay.
And if he can share those things with us, I don't know where they're at with that article, because there's many issues.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jay?
Can I step back to the subcommittee
Sure.
discussion earlier? So I just want to know what the etiquette is when when things overlap. Like I already reached out to the DPW guys because I said, okay, employee benefits and DPW, they overlap in this interesting way and I don't want to step on your toes. I don't know, is there just be nice to each other?
Play nice.
Okay.
All right. Looks like we have members of the school committee. Are you ready to join us? Yeah, come on. Do we want to make room at the table? Do we want to shove chairs together? We should all come on in. Let's make some room.
Talk at school, I gotta have candies.
Come on in.
Yeah, we can, like, those chairs, like, have them.
A lot of people.
Who is it? I'd just say attendee. I don't think he will.
How you doing?
Come on in.
Your budget binders have a copy of our presentation. Would you like it on a stick so you can put it up? It's up to you how you want to deal with that. If you'd rather look at it on a screen and share it, or just look in the books.
I think for people that are here, it might be appropriate to put it somewhere.
Yeah, well, because also,
Yeah.
there's people watching on Milton Access Television, and so, Karen, are you able to? All right.
Sure.
Oops, sorry. It should open. No, it should show up on your drive. As a drive.
Technology.
Oh, thank you.
Usually when you plug in
That's got the whole crew here.
yeah. Sometimes. That's removed probably.
Can we get them to all introduce themselves? Can I ask a question? Can we just have everybody introduce themselves? Because I don't think everybody knows who everybody is. I think I know everybody.
Is there another USB on this side? Maybe it's just a different port. We'll try. Yeah, I know. Where it should show, there's USB drive. Okay, that's it. That's it. Didn't like that port. Move port out. And push it, share it. just need to share the screen.
Perfect.
I think we're all set. Just want to take this moment to say hello and thank you for having us. We have the entire school committee here tonight, and we look forward to discussing our budget with you and answering any questions. And imagine that there will be some back and forth, and this may go on beyond this evening, but we look forward to starting the conversation tonight. And I just want to tell you what a special moment in time this is for our district. We have with us our current interim superintendent, Janet Sheehan, who has been with us since August, who is leaving on Friday. We have, and we are all very grateful for the time that Janet has given us and helping us with this transition time, and a very, very important time. We have Dr. Garth McKinney, who will be stepping in as our interim superintendent between now and when Dr. Peter Burrows begins. And we also have Dr. Peter Burrows here, our incoming superintendent, who will begin working with us in July, although he's here today to join us and join you tonight because our school budget is so important to everything we do. So thank you for having us, and I'll turn it over to Betty White, is the chair of our finance committee. And
thank you for having us tonight, and I watch your meetings, so I know about your deliberations, and I served on the warrant committee 2 different times, back in the early 90s, and then again up to 6 years ago when I left the warrant committee to join the school committee. And I also want to thank Glenn Pavlicek for, he stepped in when we had another transition in our administrative team. And Glenn, as many of you might know, was our assistant superintendent for business for many years. And prior to that was also a member of the school committee, and prior to that was also on the warrant committee and chaired the warrant committee. So he brings an expertise that makes me not be nervous tonight presenting because Glenn's here. So, the subcommittee of the schools consists of several members, and they're here tonight. Although Selena, I don't know if Selena's joined us yet, but I know she's coming from a work meeting. So Selena is one of our members, and Beverly Ross Denny is another member. But all of our school committee members are invited to join us, and they often do come to our often weekly meetings, and we begin our budget process early, and we meet with all of the principals, the department heads, our administrative team, and we put together a budget for what the needs are for the school district. And you know, for many of you who've been following the schools, our budget needs change frequently because of enrollment, of students moving into the district, and the needs of those students. So it's a very complex budget. It's a large budget, as you know, and so we're here to, you know, fill you in on any questions you have and listen to your thoughts, and I'm going to let Glenn take over at this time.
Thank you. We have this is a brief presentation, it's about 14 slides, including titles, that we presented to the school committee, just to give a quick overview of how the budget was developed. And then I'll give you a little walk through the book to let you know where you can find things and what's in there. And then, you know, we can go from there in terms of any questions or things you might have for us. So if you, this year, of course, you know, is tricky because of ARPA. There's a lot of ARPA funding that was for this particular year that's falling off after fiscal 23, and that we want to deal with in fiscal 24. So if you look at it from a sort of holistic perspective here, the general fund, sorry, following along, the general fund and ARPA. they're starting by saying, we'd like to do the same thing next year that we're doing this year. And this year, we have 58 million and change from the general fund, and we're receiving about 1.2 million in ARPA funding. Next year, that ARPA funding drops off, and it goes to only $282,000. And so in order to roll forward the general fund and the ARPA positions that we currently have, it would mean rolling up $61 million in the general fund. So overall, the cost of moving from where we are now to where we want to be next year is about $2 million, but it's $3 million to the general fund because you're making up basically $1 million worth of lost ARPA funding. So this is the ARPA cliff we've been talking about, you know, ever since ARPA came in, that you're putting money, you're getting federal money, and it's going to go away. And this is the year where largest amount of it goes away. So this, the first slide is in there just to say, really what we're looking for is rolling forward for about a 3% raise, but in fact, to the general fund, it's a larger cost than that. Mm-hmm. So again, the next slide, just very quickly, our appropriation this year, the 58 million, for level service for those people on the general fund, which is what the rest, pretty much the rest of this book talks about. It takes about $2 million to roll the existing scenario with existing staff, existing services forward. But then you have to make up the ARPA restoration, about $978,000. So again, you're looking at about $2 million to move us forward from the general fund, but plus $1 million for the ARPA restoration. Mm-hmm. The next slide, these are the positions that are actually being funded through ARPA. The coordinator of all of our preschools, the 5014 chair, which is the person who supervises all the American with Disabilities Act accommodations through the district. One of our elementary reading specialists is on ARPA money. A math support teacher at the high school. Our kindergarten aides, once upon a time, for many years, were 0.8 FTEs, which means they weren't there all day. The ARPA money allowed us to make them full-time. If you think about kindergarten aides, they're probably most necessary at the beginning and end of the day when you're putting boots on and taking boots off and things like that. Having them there for less than the whole day is not really efficient. 2 part-time nurses. In even post-COVID times, our nursing staff is stretched. 2 of the preschool teachers, 2 board-certified behavioral analysts. These are people who deal with children with behavioral issues, and 3 special education aides. I should mention that last spring it was noted when we went into ARPA funding that the 2 preschool teachers and the 3 special education aides are in fact required positions by IEPs, and it was said at the time that they would need to be rolled forward on going forward because they were necessary positions. So even though they're ARPA funded, that's the issue. So that's just to move forward, all right? That's in this, the rest of it is we're talking about some of the needs we have beyond level service, because it's our obligation to let you know what our needs are. We all know that this is going to be a very difficult budget year, but it would not be proper for us to not let you know where the needs of the district are. The first one here is a very substantial need. Speech therapist, half-time occupational therapist, and physical therapist. These are actually required by IEPs for students who are currently on ed plans. We are going to have to hire these, period. It's a legal mandate for children on special education. So although they are above and beyond what we currently have, the IEPs are dictating that we're going to have to hire them. We may, in fact, not be able to wait till next fall to hire them. It may be the case that we actually have to bring them on this spring to meet the needs of students with educational plans. And the next page is actually similar. We have, as you probably know, a bunch of classrooms over at the Collicott School where we service children on the autism spectrum. They are, because of the space crunch, and you keep hearing space crunch over and over again until you're sick of it, some of those are in less than full-size classrooms. They are in converted office spaces, they're in converted, sometimes storage spaces for people. They're squeezed into spaces that are not full classroom size. As a result, you can only put 8 or 9 students legally into those rooms. And so we have children rising from the preschool, we have children that we know are moving in, coming up from early education, that we know we are going to need an extra autism classroom at the college. So that involves a special education teacher, 2 ABA aides. And we also know that the first cadre of those students for the autism spectrum that we introduced many years ago is now hitting the high school. So we now have to start servicing those children at the high school. So the ones on this page as well are, even though again, they don't exist currently, these are positions we are going to have to fund for next year because we do have to service the needs of these students. So these 2 pages are sort of in the middle between rollover and needed. These are sort of absolutely needed. Were we not to get funded for these, they would have to be funded at the expense of something else because they're just required. For the rest of the few slides here, we've been meeting with principals, coordinators, and so forth since October, asking their needs, and several members of your committee have been attending our meetings and have watched the list get pared down over time from a larger list of what we think of the sort of the absolute minimum needs for each school. When a principal came in saying, I need this, 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 and this, and we say, well, what are your top 2? Where can we go from here? So just for your other needs, in special education, and these remaining ones are in no particular order, they're just sort of grouped by type. For special education, we'd like to set up an intensive learning classroom in Tucker for preschool children. We have a bunch of young students coming into the district, some who are already in the district, who, although are not in special education yet, are coming out of backgrounds where they haven't had early childhood education, they haven't come out of preschools, they haven't come out of formal daycare or anything like that, and we're concerned. They're behind already at age 4 and 5, and we'd like to create a structured place to get them up to speed before they fall behind further and possibly end up in the special education world or somewhere else. This is sort of preventative medicine for some very younger children that we want to make sure are serviced. And the other education need from special ed was our out-of-district coordinator. We have currently a 0.6 FTE out of 2.3 FTE positions for out-of-district coordinator. These are people who go around to the 51 students we have in out-of-district placements and have to do their individual ed plan meetings. They have to supervise they have to visit the sites, work with the instructors there, making sure plans are met and so forth. We had 2 people part-time this year at 3.3 FTE each. One of our team chairs, we needed some extra help, and so one of them moved into a team chair position at the high school and did some extra work there. So our director of special education, director of pupil personnel services, and the assistant director have actually been going out and doing these because we didn't have anyone else. But we've gone up from 41 to 50 students in out-of-district placements. And so to go around to all the out-of-district placements and service all these, it really has become a full-time job for one person to do all that traveling. We have students in everywhere from collaboratives on the South Shore down to we have a student who's in a specialized program in Rhode Island. We have a student in New Hampshire for a specialized program. So this is a lot of work. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, we have a DEI director, and she had asked for some extra staffing. This is basically a pared-down version of that. We were looking for one person to assist her as a coach to go around to work with teachers, and some stipends for a teacher in each building to basically act as a facilitator to do some of the work that she needs to do, and we can talk about that as well. And some professional development costs there for that department. At the elementary school, our targeted ask is for an additional math interventionist. We have 2 currently. But they are, there's a lot of lost learning from COVID. And so their service, we had to look at how many students they could service, sort of draw a line and say they're going to service all these students who are behind in math, meet them in small groups, push them to classrooms, work with them. We'd like to lower the bar a little to reach a math interventionist. The students who need it the most get it now. We'd like to service more. Again, to make up for some of that lost learning. It's primarily targeted now at grades 3, 4, and 5, correct? So we'd like to bring it down into some second graders as well to help boost that lost learning in math. So again, we have 2 positions currently. Thanks again to grant funding. They're both ARPA funded for now and into next year. But we'd like to add this one. This would be, if nothing less than a permanent position on the general fund, so that if there were issues with ARPA funding in the future, we would still have this one as well. But we feel we really need a third to deal with some of those issues. At the middle school, we really there were a variety of different requests here, but we've sort of culled it down to 2. A technology exploratory teacher. The biggest classes at the middle school are in the exploratories, all the different things other than your core subjects. And exploratories at middle school are a little different than electives at the high school. Electives at the high school, you say, I'd like to take woodshop. I'd like to take music. I'd like to take this. At the middle school, it's, you have 5th period free. Let's see where we can put you. It's not so much a request, but we're exposing you to different topics, and there might be some requests, but it's going to be a lot more determined by the schedule because the classes get so overcrowded. When you see 70 sections in excess of 25 students, that's a lot in middle school. And a grade 6 ELA support teacher, again, dealing with people moving up from grade 5 who need some extra help in English language arts. Originally, the principal had asked to create a new team at the 6th grade. We sort of went back and forth on that and said, that's a lot. Let's target where we need it the most. We have a math support person at the 6th grade. Let's put an English language arts support person at the 6th grade and target those 2 disciplines. So those are the 2 pieces here. At the high school, the high school had on here some future needs, but really they called it to the most important one they thought, which is the business career tech teacher. Business career tech is an interesting hybrid. It encompasses the business courses, the economics courses, the cooking courses, the woodshop. It's sort of an amalgam because we used to have department heads for all those things, and in past budget cuts we combine them. So it's interesting that the director of technology oversees the textile course where they're sewing clothing. It's an interesting talent, let's say, to be able to do that. But this is the elective area where we have the most desire. For instance, we have 4 AP economics sections, but that means the teacher can only teach 1 intro economics section. Well, if you only have 1 intro, you're not going to have 4 APs very long. Also in here, I have 27 sections out of 50 or over 25 students. That's actually a little misleading. A lot of these sections, wood shop, auto shop, cooking, are capped at 25 or less for OSHA reasons. You can't put that many kids in a kitchen. You can't put that many kids in a wood shop. So in fact, that 27 out of 50 is probably more like 27 out of 38 or 40 that are over the 25 students here. This is our most over-enrolled and by students desired elective set that really needs extra support. Finally, system high technology request. Our technology department is a director and 3 tech people for 5 buildings, 5,000 plus pieces of equipment. We actually We actually had more people in the tech department in 2003 when I joined the school committee than we have now. And we have a whole lot more technology than we ever had in 2003. So we just need another body to deal with Chromebooks and this and that. And frankly, if it wasn't for, as I said before, it wasn't for a class at the high school of students who repair Chromebooks and are really good at it, we would be underwater. No question about it. So the final piece here is just, because I know from experience, warrant committees like numbers. Here's as many numbers as I could fit on one page for you. Basically summarize it all in one place. So that's 5,000-foot overview, all right? The rest of your book, it gets into the nitty-gritty details of this. The next section, the budget summary. This is our budget chart of accounts is dictated by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have to break it into 7 major categories: policy and administration, instructional leadership, instruction, and so forth. We have to put it in special line numbers because they believe that if everyone does this, they can compare district to district. They can keep believing that because no two districts do it the same way anyway, but we'll go with that. That's the idea behind it for certain. So what I've done here is broken it down. I hear myself.
Sorry, I had to drive down to get in. Emily, I'm gonna go on Zoom now, okay? I can do it from in this building. Okay.
All right. So the next section is basically an overview showing you where we were the last couple of years, what our budget is this year, what our proposal is this year, and where ARPA fits into it. The next several sections are, detailed breakdowns of those different sections. And so, for instance, for each section, policy, administration, instruction, and so forth, we'll give you a list of literally every position. The way I did the budget for salaries for this is that we took a snapshot. It was at the beginning of November of this year. We just took, this is the staff we have right now. Took every person, said, well, if they were a step 6 this year, they're going to be a step 7 next year. We know what the contractual raise is, and I just literally person by person, rolled the whole thing forward. So our budget isn't based, for instance, on salaries, saying, well, it was so much this year, it's going to be this much next year. No, it's this many people this year, it costs this. Those people next year cost that. Just to try to make it as clear as possible. You can look person by person through this and see what they're making and so forth. We also have a breakdown of the non-salary costs at the back of it. Putting in a small inflationary increase for things like text materials and supplies and so forth. Special education is going to be in here. Interestingly, special education, the out-of-district placements we have currently, that the state has tentatively approved a 14% increase in out-of-district tuitions. That is astounding amount, because we spend $4.6 million on out-of-district tuitions. We are hoping, and everybody's pushing back on this, from the Schools Committees Association, from the Superintendents Association, the municipal associations, to say, you can't let that stand. That is just way too high of an increase. We have a lower increase built into here. I put notes in here so you can take a look at it. It's been historically around 6%. I've also built in, this is net of our circuit breaker. Circuit breaker for special ed students, if you're not familiar with it, if we spend more than $42,000 in change on a student, the state is supposed to, and this is subject to funding, supposed to pay us 75 cents on the dollar for every dollar we spent above that, a year in arrears. So we get about $2.2 million in circuit breaker for that $5.6 million. So what you're seeing in here is a net. The general fund is net of those two. So, but still the breakdown is here to try to give you an idea of what the costs are. The other cost breakdown in here that we will have to, we will be continuing to revisit, and you'll hear this from Nick Milano on the town side, are the utility costs. We know what our electric rates are locked in for a while, but the gas is up. We're trying to figure out what you should budget for next year for those things. If anyone's got a crystal ball, that would be really helpful. But, you know, we put in reasonable assumptions, we think, for costs for those. But those are obviously volatile, and that's volatile for everyone in town. We bid together with the town on all the utilities. We don't do it separately. I work with Bill Ritchie and Nicolano, and we bid out all the different fuels and so forth. So we'll see where that plays out. That's just sort of probably our major unknown right now, and it's a major unknown for everyone. Beyond that, in this, I've given you a breakdown of, it's just an itemization, and people ask about the food service budget, if there's a ledger in here for that, what our revolving funds are, what grants we get, the latest NASDAQ enrollment projections that they sent us in November. I've included those in here, a copy of the school strategic plan, a copy of the school department goals. So all those various backup things are in here for you to take a look at. That's how we've organized it. And so I hope it gives you enough information to start looking, and we're here to answer tonight or whenever any questions you have about what assumptions were made and what's where we go from here. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one, if I can ask, and it may be in here, but it has to do with the SPED program. There was a different meeting that I don't remember what it was, but it was talking about the cost of SPED and the out-of-district students, and that the hope was at some point to bring more students back into the system. So the required positions of healthcare and teachers and teachers' aides, is what you presented tonight your baseline today? And if we brought more students back into the district, we would have to have more positions because it's required.
Well, the ask for the one of the positions we were implementing anyway that isn't in here because we fear it's cost neutral is we're trying to create a medical model classroom. We're hiring a teacher or two and bringing a couple students back into district, which we hope will remain revenue neutral. Since we're not asking for money for that, we just want to do it. It's sort of not in here because we're in the process of trying to do it right now. So we feel that's a cost neutral item. But yes, some of these others, if implemented, could bring people back into district. I mean, the new autism spectrum classroom, we hope the flip side of that, if we don't do it, more students will go out of district because we won't have a classroom for them. So, I mean, there's a certain amount of cost avoidance in this. But this is, had we had, remember Fonpon? Had we had space, to have more classrooms, there could be further savings by taking some of the children we currently have in out-of-district placements and bringing them back. We don't have the space to really do that in any numbers right now, but some of this is really cost avoidance to keep them from going out.
Right, so what you presented is what's required by law in order to keep status the way it is today.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So Glenn, could you just speak a little bit about what the tuition and transportation are for some of the out-of-district placements, so people could have a sense of comparison between that and what a teacher would cost if we had a student or a few students in district?
Well, we have, as I say, about 51 students who are currently in out-of-district placements. At a total cost of about $4.6 million. On top of that, we have to transport them. Only about 6 of them are in residential placements. The rest are basically commute there. Our special ed transportation costs are roughly $1.6 to $1.8 million on top of that. If you want to become rich, open a special ed transportation bus company. It is incredible. We can't find people. Prices are incredible. We have some students who are transported distances at a cost of $200 a day for some of these students with medical needs. A residential placement can easily go into $200,000 or more a year. We had one a couple of years ago that was close to $500,000. the simplest quote-unquote out-of-district placement, which would be to go to a collaborative program, you know, on the South Shore, is still going to have tuition in excess of $50,000. You know, it's cheaper to send all these children to Harvard than it is to send the programs they're in. It's very expensive. And so that's you know, special ed has gone up post-pandemic. 5 years ago, 15% of our students had individualized education programs. Today it's about 20. The numbers have gone from 650 to close to 800 of our students are on IEPs. And a lot of it is due to, you know, issues surrounding being out of school with the pandemic and so forth. They come back, learning losses there. They say, well, they need to be evaluated for special education services, and we're seeing a higher percentage qualifying. It used to be maybe 50% of students who are evaluated would qualify for services. Now it's closer to 80. So the special ed numbers are growing.
Who are your TR2s, response interventionists? How many of those do we have in our schools?
Sorry?
Our TR2s, which are response interventionists, those people on the cusp of IEPs, how are we responding to those students?
Those students are still in general education.
Okay, so they're not receiving, we're not responding to the general.
Our tier, if you're talking about our student support teams and students who go before those teams.
Sure.
They may receive, they would receive services in general education from the math interventionist or the reading specialists. However, if they don't make adequate progress, they may be referred for an evaluation, and that's where the team makes a determination whether or not a student is eligible for special education by way of a disability or a developmental delay. So, as Dr. Pavlicek just said, of those students who are being tested now, and this also includes not just our students who've gone through the student support team process, the pre-referral process as we call it. We're also seeing preschoolers coming in who are also, we have higher numbers who are eligible for special education.
But when Mr. Pavlicek, he said that our interventionists are only covering grades 3, 4, and 5. We have 67% of our students in first grade behind in math, and 60% of our second graders behind in math. How are we addressing that in our budget?
We have another math interventionist who will work with students in the lower grades. We also have a new math program that is differentiated so that teachers are able to teach whole class lessons, divide the class into groups so that students who need to be challenged, there are instructional materials that address those students who can work independently after the lesson. And then there are those students who can work in a small group with the teacher and receive support.
But as we know from past scoring, those students aren't getting the necessary education. So we don't have math interventionists at every school. How are we going to be able to divide one specialist interventionist to all of the schools for first and second grade?
So what we will do is use all 3 interventionists, and we will look at the student data among all the schools. So it's not one interventionist is assigned to one school. It's all based on the data of the whole cohort of students.
But I still think that looking at this budget, and we'll have to, you know, with the overlapping of certain, we didn't find it necessary to put that in. And I'm speaking this because I've obviously been at every forum, I'm at every budget subcommittee, and the town is asking for more of those academic, we're hearing it in the forums, and for us to not budget for interventionists for every school, but then look at other needs. You know, I keep hearing that we need more of our teachers and we need more of this. What I did notice is that we need to start really looking at where we're overlapping and where we have coordinators doing positions that maybe we could, you know, have where other people are doing those positions, and where we can add more teachers, where it's math teachers needed, science teachers needed at the high school levels, yet we are not budgeting them for them. The fact of the matter is that we're in an inflation and we're asking for the town to pay for that in an override, but we aren't putting in our regular academic budget. These teachers that are needed, math teacher, science teacher at the high school level, tech teacher, exploratory teachers. Our middle schoolers are 3 grades behind in math. We have students, and we talk about these pillars, but we didn't put an academic pillar in, which really needs to address the kids that, social, emotionally, that's great, and of course we should have those pillars. But they can't read, and emotionally, if they can't read, we need to make sure we have reading interventionist specialists in there to make sure.
So what I would like to clarify is that we do have an academic pillar, and that is personalized learning. So we've actually had some discussion among our strategic planning committee to consider substituting the personalized learning pillar for academic excellence, because we feel that we could have done a better job communicating to the parents that is really synonymous with academic excellence. So that is a priority, and that is what it's all about.
Sure.
But because we were adopting some strategies that we thought would better meet the needs of our students, we called it personalized learning, but it is actually meant to be synonymous with academic excellence. The other thing that I would like to address is, as Dr. Pavlicek said, we have been meeting with our principals, our department heads, and curriculum coordinators since October. And we have had multiple meetings. We have prioritized the needs of their schools. So we do rely heavily on the principals and our specialists and coordinators, our leadership team, to make recommendations and prioritize the needs of each grade. So our director of mathematics at this time is asking for 1 math interventionist in addition to the 2 we have. But those interventionists will be supporting all of the 4 schools, and it will all be in accordance with prioritizing the data that we have on students. We have a very comprehensive assessment system, and our teachers monitor their students according to the assessment, and that's led by our leadership team. So we're zeroing in on students. We understand the unfinished learning piece. The teachers are receiving considerable support to make sure their students get what they need. But when you say students aren't reading, we know the students who are struggling.
Is that grant to change the reach for reading in here? Is that looked at for next year? Speaking of
no, that grant was not to provide a new program. That grant was to provide supplemental materials, and our scores were too high to qualify for that grant.
So I have a question. So last year there was an ask for 5 math interventionists, and none were hired. So yeah, like
5?
5. It was in the budget. It was a budget request, and it was part of ARPA, and the request was from JET, and it never happened. I don't have
mid-year?
So
I'm sorry to interrupt.
So there was a math interventionist requested. This is my understanding. Well, I don't recall that, but I wasn't here at the time. But I do understand the history around a math interventionist that has been questioned a number of times.
Yeah.
That math interventionist was in the budget. It was during COVID. The position was posted. There were no applicants. We never were able to hire the math interventionist. So it was my understanding that that funding was taken back because the position wasn't filled.
It went into the
So then-
general fund, and you hired a diversity person.
Pardon me?
It went back into the general fund.
Yes.
And you hired a diversity person. I
Diversity
can
person was
prove
hired
that.
before that.
I can prove that to you.
No, the diversity person was hired before I left in 2020.
Maybe I'm thinking 2 years back, but there was an ask for 5 math interventionists, and none of them were hired.
Do you mean, are you saying that we received funding for 5
Yes.
positions?
You asked for it, and the warrant committee said, okay.
School committee members
I don't remember anything
were
like
here.
that. No, that's, I'm sure that can be verified, but.
So
I'll prove it to you.
Superintendent Sheehan
Okay.
also mentioned the math curriculum, which was approved, and we
Yep.
purchased the new math curriculum for this year.
Yep.
And, that we have not yet had the opportunity to see in the data
outcomes that we expect from this improved curriculum. As we pointed out last year, the curriculum we've had for many years was subpar, it had been rated subpar by the state. So, you know, I think it's also, as you just laid out, I think pretty clearly important to vet the number of math interventionists required in relation to our current curriculum, which is not the same as you would expect under a subpar curriculum, which is what we had before. So it would make sense that we needed 5 more. I don't recall the specific numbers, but it would make sense that we would need more interventionists when we have a subpar curriculum, now that we have a curriculum that supports teachers to do the differentiation in the classrooms, which is what you want them to be able to do. You know, the Ryan C. Lake has determined what is needed in the context of this. So just making sure that we're up to date on that, because I know that was a really important investment that you all helped us get last year, and the town supported that, which was really important. It hasn't yet been able to sort of show the outcomes, because we're only halfway through the first year.
Just ask last year me, who doesn't recall that either.
Right.
The ARPA money.
I'll show you.
Question, speaking of, was spent on hiring teachers, but how do we support using the ARPA money to create initiatives such as, you know, after school tutoring, Saturday tutoring? Do we spend any money left regarding ARPA that way?
Some of the ESSER money, which is a separate grant, was used for the Beyond the Bell services.
Which was Beyond the Bell's been around prior to ARPA funding coming in.
This is an enhanced Beyond the Bell, more than beyond what we had in our. There was some summer program, and we still have money in the budget for Beyond Bell during the year as well.
Yeah, so, okay, I was just curious, because Beyond the Bell was created before learning loss.
But in response to the point about the summer programs, the first summer, I think it was probably 2021, the district implemented a open summer school program in order to begin to address learning loss. And it was open to every child in Milton. It was free of charge. It also included enrichment activities so that people would have an incentive to participate. And I believe we did it last summer also. So funds were spent 2 summers in a row for a summer academic enrichment program to address learning loss. I would love to say that the capacity for children to make up for any losses is something that's calculated. So if we put in 3 hours, you're going to get, 2 points plus. It's not that easy. Every child is different. But as we talked about during the last forum, there's multi-tier systems of supports. And the first and most important support is the classroom teacher. And with this new curriculum that's differentiated, and the data that we have, because since COVID, we have implemented district-wide formative assessments to allow us to determine what kind of gains our students making, we're in a much better position to respond to learning loss than we were that first year of the pandemic or the second year of the pandemic. But it's not going to be perfect, and it's not going to be
100%. But here's the thing: when you're dealing with learning loss inside the classroom, we have kids that are ready to move forward, and we have kids that have behind. What after-school programs did we create to tackle learning loss? We used to, when you were a child, be able to stay after school with your teacher to get extra help. Why did we not create the 2021 summer? That's a year after 2022. The pandemic started in 2020, correct? I mean, so we waited a year to create a summer program, over a year. What I'm saying is that we can't leave our achievers in class sitting there waiting. These kids are getting left behind because these teachers have to reteach things that kids haven't learned in the class. We could have created after school using some of that ARPA money and said, okay, let's do a tutoring program, let's do a Saturday program. We only did a summer program.
So I think we're just to make sure we're separating those.
We did Beyond the Bell last year.
During the school week.
Yes, and actually during vacation weeks.
And
we tried a different model.
And in 2020 was the first year of the pandemic where we shut everything down. We did not know what was safe. Where could you put kids together? All of our children were home. There wasn't much going on that summer except for people spending an inordinate amount of time planning. Ada was one of those people that sat on that committee determined what does it look like to create a safe learning environment. There was nothing offered in summer 2020 because that was the first year that we had to deal with the pandemic. But I do think what might be helpful for those of you who want to see what it looks like, because I know we've talked about this, we welcome you to come to a school. And why don't you look at the software that we're using to differentiate instruction so that for the kids who are ready to do more work, I can witness this for my own daughter. She has told me,
I'm
Mom.
hearing it because the kids are leaving. You had 100 kids in the 6th grade are leaving.
Well, I think
In the
in all
private
fairness-
schools because our kids are not getting the next level.
We traditionally have a number of students that leave for independent schools every year. We have Milton Academy, we have.
And unfortunately, it's
Fair-
going up because we are at 25%.
Allison, let her finish. Let her finish.
So I invite you to come to one of our schools so you can actually see it for yourself, because I think there's part of this that there's a trust factor that you have to believe that the people who've been hired to do their jobs are doing their best. But if there's any, let me finish. But if there's any concern that they're not, you're invited to come see it for yourself. That's the only way you're going to have a level of comfort that the people that we have hired are doing what's in the best interest of our children. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But we are one of the best districts in this state. As we showed last year, we ranked 40th and many people were concerned, but we were funding the schools in the bottom quartile. There are wonderful private schools, some of you here attended them, that do have wonderful intervention because parents are spending $50,000 a year in tuition to have those things. If we spent that much money per child, there's probably not enough staff because there's a teacher shortage in America, but if we had an abundance of supports, you'd be amazed what we can do. But I do think that it would be helpful for anyone who wants to see the new curriculum, the software that we're using for instruction, and what's actually happening in our classrooms. You should come and visit the school.
Just say that
I would like to
in
do
your,
that.
in your enrollment chart, in your enrollment section, we have the NESDEC enrollment. So you can see, for instance, last year in grade 5, we had 392 students. This year in grade 6, we have 366, so we lost 26 students. From 6 to 7, last year we lost 36 students. Those are numbers that we have had for a long time, because grade 7 is where you have ECI opening up, you have Zavarian, you have CM, you have all these other schools. So there's a traditional loss at 6 to 7. And now as some of these schools are opening even a little lower, moving down to grade 6 and so forth, we're seeing it. But if you look at the NESDEC numbers in their section, you can actually trace, numbers. And I don't see 100 students leaving in the 7th grade. That hasn't shown up in anything we've seen. These are the numbers given by, that we do based on student by student on October 1st of each year. So these are the most accurate numbers for enrollment.
Question, just so that I'm understanding it correctly. So when we look at the spending, just on a global level, so the ARPA was one-time funds? Was it over, they're funds that came out of COVID, correct?
There were federal funds for different periods of time. Some were for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So there was a certain amount of ARPA funding in fiscal 23, some carries into fiscal 24. And so we're looking right here at the fiscal 23 money, which is not being replaced in fiscal 24. If you go into the salary sections of the various things, for instance, in instruction, below the general fund numbers, I actually show people who are continuing on either ESSER grants or ARPA grants, but they're not part of the general fund, but they are our staff, and so I'm trying to put every staff member in here, but I broke it out by how they're funded.
So the ARPA money is gone, that what we're saying is, I guess my concern is, we had the general fund, and then we hired, and I think I had this concern last year, that we essentially took, for all intents and purposes, one-time funds, created permanent positions, but that wasn't really like a true budget in the sense, do you know what I mean? It was like you had your budget, and then you're like, oh, yay, like extra money, we're hiring people, versus if you did a program that ran a summer, then that was money spent. You can decide whether or not to do it, but now this is level staff, but not level spending, in the sense of now we've got to replace the money that isn't there. So it's sort of it was a bigger budget by luck, because we got that funding. So we've got a lot of positions, and so now we're looking at the budget is that much higher this year because now we have to pay for all those people that we hired. And so I guess that's my question. So so when you were saying this level spending, is that because of increase? So it's $2 million. Wait, what was? I'm looking at the Yeah, no, I guess my question is if the spending is, so one, it says general fund, is it now for level set where we are? Am I hearing that it's now that much more, almost close to $2 million more to have level spending?
For the people who are on the general fund, not ARPA people, and our budget for just those people and our services, it's cost $2 million more to do what we did last year. That's the inflationary and cost of living and collective bargaining increases. The additional $970,000 is to fund those positions which were funded by ARPA, which we would like to continue into this year. That's the point you're going to, is positions were spent, ARPA money was spent on positions. But the majority of those positions were to address things like learning loss and so forth. And unfortunately, learning loss has not gone away. I take it, for instance, the 2 part-time nurses. 2 or 3 years ago, we had 1 nurse at each school. Now we have a seventh nurse who floats, replace people who are out, and these 2 part-time nurses who each do 2 days a week. It would be nice to say we don't need the part-time nurses anymore, but we absolutely do. This is staffing that is necessary for the times we're in.
Right,
Yeah,
no.
and ARPA made it. The pandemic made it more apparent that we needed it, and we needed, so the ARPA money was spent on it. But that doesn't mean when the ARPA money went away, the need went away.
And to add to that, in all fairness, right, we probably would have had an override a couple of years ago if it were not for the federal money. Milton has a structural deficit.
Right.
And every several years, we have an override. In the absence of having an override, we use money from the federal government to ensure that the operations of the town can continue, in addition to paying for things like the additional HVAC costs, the additional staff. We were always short on nurses. We had schools with 600 children with 1 nurse. There is no ratio of math for which that meets any state requirements. It's just that the ARPA funding allowed us to finally have the money to hire the supplemental staff that we needed to make up for the fact that we were understaffed in those positions.
No, I understand that. It's just, it's different. Like, it's a different way. It's not like if you had come with that budget as that increase, that's very different of the town voting and saying, I'm voting on this as a whole, like that this is the new budget. Do you know what I mean? As opposed to saying we've got these funds, which makes it more palatable. I understand why it happened. I guess my other question is this a standard percentage increase year over year for level staffing, the
3% is
so every year?
fairly common. I mean, when you figure in that teachers have a 2% raise, and you have steps and lanes. Steps and lanes are often 2% or 2.2% of the budget. This is a little less than normal. In my time doing this over the years, I found that the rollover has generally been closer to 4% or a hair over 4% year over year. But actually part of this is thanks to or not thanks to COVID. We've had a lot of staff turnover, and we have a lot more new staff than we have traditionally had, and so the rollover for them is less because our salary structures, our total salary has gone down a little bit. We had a lot of veteran staff who, after COVID, said, no thanks, not coming back. And so this is, I double-checked this the first time I read it because I didn't believe it was this low, but it actually is, and I think it has to do with an excessive amount of staff turnover in the last year.
Can we also see the benefits that are, because this is just salary we're looking at, right? That doesn't include benefits
Yeah, benefits in the, right, or in
in the general.
in the group insurance,
Yeah.
in the group insurance and in the, you
So
know,
could we get,
budgets.
could we see that number? What the
I actually don't have that number. I think that's something, you'll.
The town administrator,
Town administrator can give you that.
told us that number at our joint finance meeting this week, so I think he'll bring that to your attention
Okay.
next week when he comes.
Thank you.
Okay. How many did you, for some of the ARPA funded positions, were those positions that had previously come from the general fund, or were those all brand new positions? They were all new. Okay. And then I know you guys are talking about the preschool. What happened to Child Study? Has that program ever come back?
No, it hasn't.
No. So what happened when we eliminated those 2 preschool teachers? Like, are they?
Positions. They were dual certified. The Child Study, for those who don't know, it used to be a program at Milton High School where we had 1 preschool class in Milton High School, and students, high school students as an elective, would work in that class a couple days a week, and they were, you know, future teachers, things like that. We had to eliminate that program several years ago. The teachers who taught in it were dual certified as high school teachers and preschool teachers. And so they simply moved into other high school positions.
And so, like, what happened to say, like, the money that the revenue, did that program bring in revenue? Very little. But those positions, where did that money go when we eliminated that program? No.
So the 2 teachers who were at the high school teachers backfilled other teachers who left eventually.
Okay.
So they just became high school teachers. The revenue, I mean, we had, I'm trying to remember now, 15 students in there. It was probably bringing in $15,000 to $20,000 a year. It was a very inexpensive program.
It was a great program.
It was a great program.
I loved it.
And if we had space, we would bring it back.
Yeah.
But those rooms that were built for little children are now science classrooms and other things because we had to reuse the rooms for something else. It became part of the space issue as well.
So are the other classes, so then are the preschools bigger now because that's 15 kids?
No, those were.
I know they were, but if you figure that population's the same.
No, because the other preschools are meant for special education students. So if you have 6 special education students in an integrated classroom, you have to have at least 7 quote-unquote peer role models by state. You know, there has to be more non-special education students than special education students. These students in the child study were just people who, by lottery, were able to get into the program and have their kids there for 3 days a week as a half-day preschool. And when it went away, it just wasn't that opportunity for parents anymore. It just didn't exist. They could try to, you know, they can try to become peers in the integrated preschool, but there isn't really that program anymore. So it's an opportunity lost.
It is, yeah.
I see that Judy has her hand up. Judy? Judy?
She's on mute, she may not realize.
Judy, are you on mute?
Well, I was, but I'm not now. I think if I could just revisit something, I think Steve Geister mentioned about a previous budget that was approved that had a line item approval of adding up to 5 tutors, if you will. And they weren't able to hire because there were no applicants, we found out from the school committee. Is there a way, if there's anything similar in this year's budget, it is my first year doing a budget, so just gonna ask this question. If there's a similar type of line item in this year's budget for a specific thing that isn't able to be fulfilled, is there a way to designate how these unused funds actually get used instead of going into a general fund and using it for something not even related to what the original request was for?
The technical legal answer is no. It's not the answer you want to hear, I grant, but under Chapter 71, the school committee has the authority to move around items within the budget, within the bottom line of the budget, which is why at town meeting you only vote for one number for the school committee budget, because the Ed Reform Act back in 1992 or whatever it was, designated that the towns can vote a bottom line for a school budget, but then the school committee is responsible for moving it around. What has been done in the past is, people have asked for a commitment from the school committee to do A, B, and C if funds are available. And, as a former person on the school committee, we did our best to satisfy that, because you make a promise, you should keep it. But there's no legal authority that says, if this doesn't happen, you have to do this with it. Again, not probably the direction you're hoping to go with that, but that technically is the law.
I can just speak as a school committee member. Over the 6 years I've been on the school committee, there were times when school committee members advocated for a program. The one I'm thinking about is the one up at the high school for the kids who are coming in from a medical leave or who have some behavioral issues that need extra support. And we pushed for that for a couple of years before it actually, we pushed for funding for that for a couple of years before it actually happened, because sometimes the needs change. So just like I might have put away $15,000 for this vacation that I'm dying to go to, but my roof, leaks, and I have to say, well, no vacation this year, I have to fix the roof instead. So, the school system has to be nimble enough to move around budget issues as needs arise. I mean, even this, we're in February almost. I remember sitting in meetings and Glenn, would come into finance subcommittee, and I'd almost have to say to Glenn, what's changed since last week? Because a special ed student would be moved into Milton and needed X, Y, or Z, and he would say, we were gonna put this in the budget for 2024, but we have to hire that person right now because we have a student who needs that. So we have to make changes all the time, and again, that we can make recommendations, but that's really the administration's role to decide how to use the funds, because they're the ones that operate the schools.
It would, if it's okay, it would seem to me that in good faith, the town agreed there was a need for what you asked for. And I don't know how to really express this, but if you told me you wanted to make a petting zoo with the money instead of an educational expense where there's academic learning involved, I might really question that. And if you had come to me for the petting zoo in the first place, I might have said no. Does that make sense?
What are you comparing the petting zoo to? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm comparing programs, I guess. Programs. One was to increase academic learning for some students that may have needed some extra help in certain curricular items. And it went back to the general fund and didn't seem to come back out of there for the same type of purpose, same categories. May not be math, maybe we could add some science, maybe we could put out and find some more reading and writing. But it went to a non-academic learning purpose, as Steve mentioned. So that, I guess that's what prompted my question of the town in good faith, the members, town meeting members on behalf of all the citizens, granted you that money for what seemed like a very worthy purpose. And it was never used for a very similar purpose.
I think that there's always going to be that tension. I think it's like Mr. Pavlicek was saying, is that, there's a budget, there's line items, you present it, we look at it. But then circumstances can change. The unforeseen, the roof goes. And maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't happen, and then just the way that this is set up, then it goes back into the general fund. And at the end of the day, while we have the budget, we're voting for a number. We're voting for a number.
One question I have, and I think it relates to all of this and some of that tension that comes up, and I heard it referenced earlier, is I'm curious about the per pupil spending, because I'd say, like, particularly last year, like, I know the school budget is so big in the orbit of town, and yet in the Commonwealth, like, I was kind of embarrassed when I saw where we are in terms of our per pupil spend, because that's our investment in the student, and being in the bottom quarter doesn't seem great. And then seeing like where we're ranked in terms of performance, like amazed by how we're able to do that with so little. And yet it makes me wonder, like, what if we even spent an average amount per student? And I, like, to me, it's thinking of the example of, like, you might plan a vacation, but if your roof leaks, when you're in the bottom quarter, it's not even a vacation. It's like things that you probably need, but maybe at a stretch can make it work without, because there's an emergency that comes up. And I think, like, all of the requests here feel like basic needs, which is concerning to me, because again, like, I'm amazed by the performance given the investment. So I am curious, this past year compared to the year prior, like, has there been any movement in where we are relative to the rest of the Commonwealth? Like, are we still in that bottom quarter? Are we?
I don't think they put out the numbers yet for this year. The state is slow with that. I mean, but realistically, the reason our per pupil spending where it is a function of the structure of Milton. That we are, 95% of our residential, of our tax base is residential, not commercial. We have, very little in the way of funds that we get from, we don't have that many restaurants and hotels and things like that, that a lot of, you get those taxes, other sources of revenue. Similar towns to Milton have that sort of similar structural issue, where you're so heavily dependent on the tax base of your residents, to the almost exclusion of everything else, that you don't get up in that upper realm of per pupil spending, because frankly, the ballpark we're in, where, if you were to throw in all the extra costs of the insurance and so forth for our employees, and you throw in bonding related to the schools, and you throw in everything in from all the different budgets into the schools, you're talking the school department's about 2/3 of the town budget, and that's absolutely normal in the Commonwealth. It is. And just the structure of our tax base is what limits us to be able to do more than that. I mean, as you'll see, I think the third highest after tax base and state aid, the third highest single source of income for the town of Milton is motor vehicle excise tax, of all things. I mean, who would have thought that was, what's driving your economy in the town? But that's pretty much it. It is an issue with the structure of Milton. And again, it's a decision by the people who live here, because we don't want shopping malls for the most part in Milton. I mean, that there is a quality of life that people choose to live here. They don't want, mega malls and things like that in Milton. But the flip side of that is that it's on the residential property tax, and you have to be willing to put up with that. So it's, it's the price you pay for the quality of life you get. That, in effect, that 20% of our land's not taxable between the Blue Hills and other things. But
But, I mean, if I can follow up on what you just said, the people of Milton have chosen to have a tax base that is 95% residential. I moved here 15 years ago. I think shortly before that, there was a big no mall in Milton movement. And, in the decades before that, we set the groundwork to be largely residential. I've heard rumblings, in the past decade or so, we'd like more commercial base, but not a whole lot's happening. So I don't know if this is leading to a question or a what, but Milton has chosen to be a town that is funded through residential taxes. Does that also mean Milton has chosen to have schools that are quite good, but in the bottom quartile of funding, when they could be even quite better with average funding? I don't know that Milton has chosen that. I don't know one way or the other.
I mean, we used to say, as a consequence of this tax structure here, you should expect an override every 3 to 4 years. And for many years, that's what happened. From the mid-90s through late 2000 decade, it was an override every 3 to 4 years, because it's the only way you could maintain services under the limitations of Prop 2.5, because we didn't have a lot of new growth.
But then,
because we didn't have room for new growth, because.
if I can follow up on that, but then what override? I mean, as my colleague said, a lot of these asks, they seem like not luxuries, but necessities. If it would be great if it was an, I don't know what level of dollar override it would be, but if it was an override, could we get not only the necessities, but something a little better? Again, I don't know who I'm asking.
The purpose of an override, if you're really going to do it right, you ask for a little more than you need in the first year, so that, in the second year it funds it, and in the third year you might put some of that first money from the year one into the stabilization and fund the third year, or do that on a longer stretch than 3 years. Maybe you do it on a 5-year plan or something like that, but you build it so that it carries you. That is not necessarily been historically what happened in Milton. A lot of it is we've built it so we think that will pass with that number, and so that's where the number came from. And for good or ill, that's what's happened. And you can argue that it's not the best method of planning, but then the political side of people will tell you, well, if it doesn't pass, that's worse. So you want to build a number that you think the population will accept. Because anytime there's an override, the first question obviously is, what's it going to cost me?
But I think, Jay,
Just absolutely.
but Jay, to your point, we should aspire to know, what do we want our town to be? And there are lots of people who are uncomfortable with saying, we would love to have all these things because it won't pass or people won't support it. But in reality, we could aspire to be better, right? We could aspire to do better. But we have to agree as a community that that's what we want for our children, and for independent of the schools. What do we want for our fire, for our police, for our health department? We haven't stated that yet. Wouldn't it be nice if we did? Because then these conversations wouldn't be about, how do I save $2 or how do I save $100,000? It's about, no, we're funding a vision because this is where we want to go, versus making incremental changes around the edges that aren't really moving the needle. One of the reasons why we're ranked 40th is because there's a group of kids for whom we have not supported. There are a group of kids who chronically may underperform. What if we actually invested in resources to make sure those students even did better? We wouldn't be 40, but we haven't made that decision as a town.
Well, now I feel silly asking about specific line items for a budget, but I will. I don't disagree with you. I think this is as a parent of a child in special ed and a child who is one of those $6 million numbers who's been out of district for 6 years. And my concern is that there's a lot that needs to be done in Milton's special education department, a considerable amount. And some of this feels like trying to make big leaps quickly. Like there are a lot of needs, and I hear, oh, if we had extra space and extra rooms and we could bring all these kids back. I beg to differ, because I don't think we have the programs. I don't think we have the things in place to do that. My kid was not sent out of district because of a room. It was because of a program and a placement, and Milton didn't have it, and he's one of many. So I get worried when we have conversations like that it's about space, because it's not. It's about much more than space. It's about programming. To that point, we do need more, but I'm wondering about these numbers as we're looking at them, because sometimes that word mandated, and we'll throw out, well, we have to do it because it's special ed, and we do, we do have to do these things, but I'm wondering with these numbers, they're saying these are required by current IEPs. For some of these, is this that we have new students? Is it that the service providers that we have are overtaxed and we don't have that extra speech therapist or that extra OT to do it? And I guess similarly, when you're looking at the ASD classroom at Collicott, ABA is absolutely, necessary or needed in that classroom. It's one class, it's two teachers. I guess there are things that I'm wondering, is it like, are we trying to leap ahead and fill in some of these gaps? Is the goal with some of the spending to start thinking about bringing more kids in district, or is it about immediate need? I just don't have a lot of clarity on that.
The ASD class is certainly for immediate need. We have students coming out of early intervention who are going to require that program, and the 3 classrooms we have are full at the moment.
Is this the NEC program? Or
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So that particular classroom is immediate need.
Okay.
The high school teacher is immediate need because the first group of the ASD children are now reaching the high school, and we have to have a provider who can deal with them. We have currently programs at the high school, but not really for that class of children. So those are immediate needs. Returning from out-of-district placement, you're correct. A lot of the students we have out-of-district placement are not coming back. But in conversation with the special ed director, we think there are probably half a dozen students who are currently out of district who, if we had a classroom, we could create a program and keep them here. It's lack of space and lack of the program for them that is the reason they're out of district. We are never going to bring 51 students back into district. It will not happen. A lot of these students have needs beyond our ability to deal with, or they're just too specific that we couldn't create a program for that, that particular need. But there are some that, and it's small numbers, but small numbers turn into big numbers when you're paying the tuition, that we could bring back. But, you're correct that the vast majority of those 51 children, probably 45 of them, are really not eligible to come back.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to add that we do have some situations where we are limited to space because we have, if we had larger classrooms, we could accommodate more of our students in those special classrooms. So because we're limited by the size of the classrooms, if we don't plan, we would eventually have to send students out of district.
Those ASD classrooms at Collicott have 9 students.
Mm-hmm.
If they were in a full-size classroom, we could have 15. But they're not in a full-size classroom because we don't have one. And so that's why there's 9 in that class instead of 15. And so, now you're in 3 classes instead of 2. And it's lack of space causing that.
Sorry, can I ask one other question on this? The intensive learning classroom at Tucker. So the 3 teachers, is this a particular, are we looking at a particular grade? Is this 3 teachers across grades? Because you said that there are kids that you're seeing that it sounds like they might be coming into the district or into school who haven't necessarily had preschool or learning, so that says to me it's like a kindergarten level.
It's lower level.
But 3 teachers is a lot for a school and for a new program. Are there numbers that you're looking at that?
I think there are 2 teachers for the earlier grades, but I think that our Director of Pupil Personnel Services is looking for a 3rd teacher to, again, support students around lack of readiness and unfinished learning in other grades to avoid eligibility for special education.
When she spoke to us about this need, she talked about teachers pushing into the classrooms to give extra support to certain students, and also maybe taking some students out for some small group instruction or instruction. So she talked about that because I guess Tucker does not have a specialized special ed program and so they often have to take those kids who live in the Tucker neighborhood and put them elsewhere. And she really wants to be able to have a program at Tucker, unique to Tucker, that would service their students.
But so this would be push-ins because there aren't classrooms, correct?
Pushing in and also pulling out. Kind of a combination of both, as needed.
Pulling out from our elementary schools often means a couple desks and a chair on the landing and the staircase, or at the end of a hallway, or in other places where we really should be pulling out students too, but we don't have any other options.
So it's not a specific classroom, it's more teachers that are.
And again, it's not in the category of, we have IEPs that require this. This is something that
Addressing early needs.
addressing early needs, but
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the Warrant Committee? Do you have it? Yep, Jay?
Yep, I have one. This is.
No, Henny's got his hand up.
And O'Henny.
Oh, and O'Henny. Well, I've already spoken, if O'Henny would like to speak first.
Oh, Jay, you can go ahead and I'll follow you.
Okay, this is sort of on the issue of school overcrowding and what do we do about it, and we're realizing that in the next couple of years, we're going to be probably choosing between, hate to be a pessimist, but choosing between bad options and just deciding what's best. We've heard this committee's heard a couple times about that Cunningham or Collicott has an elementary school room in the library, and that's not great. I guess what I'm wondering is, as it relates to the budget, if there was more money for teachers' aides, could an elementary school classroom have 50% more kids if you have 2 adults instead of 1? I know nothing about education, keep that in mind. But given that we're choosing between difficult choices, if we spend more on staff, could that buy us some breathing room on space that we're going to need for the next couple of years?
Well, we have licensed teachers who are effective in supporting students. Our teacher aides are not licensed. So while there are certain supports that they can provide, and certainly we have many aides already in the district, when it comes to instruction, we really want to have licensed teachers.
Could we have 2 licensed teachers in a room?
Yes.
I know it's not great.
Yes, we actually do. We do have that model, and it's called our co-teaching model, where we have 1 general education teacher and 1 special educator. So for students who have such needs that require they're with a special educator all day, needs what we call specialized instruction, those teachers work together in those classrooms.
But Janet, if I can intervene,
Sure.
just in terms of just walking around our schools and looking at the average size of our classrooms, I think as much as, it would sort of, say, why not, right? Let's put more kids in a classroom. I don't think it's doable already with about 24 kids in a room. I know this, I go and volunteer in my daughter's classroom all the time. It feels quite crowded, it's tight. And especially as we're moving into more differentiated learning and teaching and thinking of universal design, and which means we're really thinking about, how do we meet the needs of that student? Then you really also need space, right, to structure the learning in a different way. So I think we're limited by the size of our classrooms. We wouldn't be able to fit too many more. I think about my daughter's kindergarten experience was actually there were, I think, 4 different teachers and in the classroom, but the classroom was actually the largest classroom in Cunningham. So that made maybe it was about 27 of them in that particular room. But there was also, it was an integrated classroom too, so it was meeting the needs of various students. So I do think we're limited in terms of space.
We are. I didn't mean to talk about the co-teaching model to suggest that we could just add twice as many students.
Yeah.
I didn't mean that. I just sort of went to that because we do already have that in existence, but we don't add more students because of it. We do it to support those students who need specialized instruction.
With that overcrowding, what's our residency check policy? Just to make sure that we get every seat in that room, to make sure that we have policy. What is that?
we check residency when students enter the district. We check residency as they would check residency as they move up to 6th grade. We check residency again as they move up to 9th grade. and we check residency anytime we have a suspicion that something has happened. For instance, we monitor house sales, we monitor, all of our mailings have a return address on them that requires them not to be forwarded and be returned to us if the address isn't correct. So we have one person whose job it is just simply to monitor residency. It is an ongoing process. It's not necessarily as simple as it sounds sometimes, because you have people who move into town and are living with relatives. Their name isn't on the lease. They don't own the building, but they are living there. And sometimes it's hard to prove or disprove that. So but we monitor it constantly. It is an issue. We have a number of students, and I'd have to go back and look, who are actually put out of the district every year because we find they don't live here. It's a battle to keep under control. But there are other issues too. I mean, if someone is in foster care or homeless, there are all sorts of special rules involving them. They may not physically reside in Milton, but be entitled to be here under special rules with the state. But for the most part, it's really just a matter of ongoing, watching the real estate sales and watching all that sort of stuff, and the periodic kindergarten, 6th grade, 9th grade recertifications, which are not popular with parents, I might add, but it's something we have to do.
May I just follow up? How many is that residency coordinator? How many is she full-time?
Half-time.
She's 30 hours.
She's 30 hours, 3/4 time.
Oh, Henny, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and forgive me for my camera not working and for not being in person. This is no disrespect to the school committee. I love you guys. It's late dinner here. So a couple of questions, and thank you for the members in discussion. I'm trying to follow. I might have missed a bit at the beginning. If it's been answered, please just go ahead and say so. No offense taken. My first question, just following up on that residency thing. I wish we could spend the money we spend checking residency and invest that in the kids. I'll be honest. I don't think sending police officers into homes to open doors and make sure people do that is for me is a best way to think about how we spend education dollars. But that's my own 2 cents, and that's not a hill I want to die on today. What I do want to know is, and thank you guys for the work you've done. There's been an inordinate amount of change in the leadership in this district. I thank you, the acting superintendent, for stepping in. You guys, the fact that you're sitting here with this plan is admirable, considering what you all have been through and the turnover and everything. And I don't want us to take it for granted. Having been one of the long-serving members here, the way this goes is we cut your budget, we push against you, and then we complain you didn't do more. And so I also want to apologize for the nature of that process. It just is what it is. It's our job to pressure test this, and we will continue to do so. All that said, the question I asked last year and the question I asked the year before is the same one I'm going to ask now. And that is how these plans go along with your greater strategic plan, right? How does everything we're talking about fit into context of the larger plan for bringing the school district forward? We can debate about this teacher, this math teacher. As Jay said, none of us are experts. None of us really know. But what we want to know is that there's a plan that is coming forward and that you can see that this fits into some larger plan. One area that I'd like specific focus on, and forgive me, I'm not there to look at the book and check the numbers myself yet, is on technology. Everyone is talking about things that we need to cut and spend, and we do need to cut. Technology is an area where I think we've underfunded. And everyone who's used one of those Chromebooks knows that better materials, everyone who's used a bad computer knows the challenges of that. And so I would love to know, technology to say where we can plan for, not just planned obsolescence, but thinking about the systems. Does this fit into plan, or has COVID thrown us off our strategic plan? Where are we in that big picture is kind of my first question.
Excellent question. And as we've been actually presenting the strategic plan, a lot of as we were considering and meeting with teachers and with principals and everybody else that we were meeting as we were developing the budget that you see before you, it was through that lens of the strategic plan and asking that question. How does is this gonna move sort of our pillars, right? Our focus on increasing individual student achievement, because that's a focus, right? That's the outcome that we wanna see. We wanna make sure that we're seeing progress by student. And then in the aggregate, that we're starting to see movement in terms of our district. Yes, we do well, but obviously we aspire to rank even better, right? That's what we wanna do. And thirdly, to make sure that those disparities that have been in place for a long time, the opportunity gaps, if you will, that have been there, that we are filling, that we're meeting that need. And that means, that there are definitely subgroups that have been left behind. And so how do we make sure that we're paying attention to subgroups? And obviously the most recent data is flagging other groups. We're starting to see that, achievement by subgroup for groups that traditionally have done well are not doing well. So the strategic plan really does give us that framework to ask ourselves, why is that happening? Let's look at it and let's figure it out. So in terms of the budget, the development of the budget, it was in alignment with our strategic plan. Now, you'll see that there are modest asks in terms of some areas of the strategic plan, and the majority of it goes into personalized learning, into the learning piece, into the academic piece, because we know that as a school committee, that's what we're holding ourselves against. But knowing that we need to do all the other pillars, if you will, of the strategic plan in order to move our students forward. So I think that the budget very much aligns with our strategic plan, and we're looking at it from that perspective. Everything that we're doing, sort of our actions as a school committee, as a district, is against that strategic plan. It has placed sort of our North Star of where we want to get to, and that's what we're holding to.
Thank you very much. And so I'm hoping when I look at the book, based on what you were saying, that I'd be able to say something like, this is where our goal is in terms of, whatever mathematics, and this is our percentage that we've achieved so far. This is where our goal is in terms of SPED, and I think that would really help our committee and our town to understand a sense of that kind of graduated sense. It's just my 2 cents into how I think the budget can look, but we'll look at the book today, and you guys have done a great job. I want to commend Amy Dexter when she came in. I did notice a turnaround in the budget when you took over. Thank you, looks great. Really appreciate the work there. There was a piece about technology that no one answered in terms of the plan for technology and our strategic plan with that. Are we investing more? Are we staying level? Where does that fit?
The technology, most of the technology, certainly with respect to Chromebooks, is a part of the capital budget. It's not part of the budget, the operating budget for the school. So you'll see it when you see your capital budget proposal, that we have requests in there for periodic replacement of the Chromebooks. They've come in waves, so it doesn't happen linearly, because when you buy a Chromebook, the operating system expires after a certain number of years and is no longer compatible. So you replace them at the rate you bought them at. So if you had one year that had a lot, you have to replace that many. It's a shame, because sometimes you have working Chromebooks, but the operating system is out of date and you can't use them anymore for MCAS. And you can't upgrade them, because the Chromebooks only can be upgraded so many times. But we do have a plan for the technology. It's primarily in the capital plan, although there's a certain amount in here of periodic replacement. All the infrastructure is contained in the operating budget, all of our network capacity, all of the spam filters, all of those sorts of baseline stuff is in our operating budget, and a certain amount of replacement, repair, and so forth is in our operating, but the majority of technology lies in the capital. Periodic server replacements and things like that.
Dr. Pavlicek, that's exactly my concern, that the technology strategy is not intersected at all with the large, just sitting capital in terms of replacing Chromebooks. We all know that these Chromebooks, you can upgrade them a certain amount of time. At some point, are we going to think about buying systems that are actually going to enable us to do more than just the sort of cheap Chromebook that we can only do so much with and throw them away? I just mean that I think technology is moving at a pace that just buying replacements is not a plan. I would love for us to have a plan that actually thinks about the advancement of technology, if we want to be a cutting edge school, which I think we've all agreed that based on our spending, we don't want to be, but I think if we want to get there someday, that's the kind of thing that we should aspire to. I will leave that there until I look at the budget. The real question that's really been plaguing my mind as I think about this is everyone knows what it is to get a new boss. When the new boss comes in, guess what happens? Things change. And so you're asking us to cut a check and support the town in saying this. And so I want to ask Superintendent Burrows, how does this plan align with your vision? Don't put you on the spot. Before we cut the check, I think this is a good question. And everyone, look, the new boss, if you come back next year and say, well, last year we did this, but I really want to go this direction, I'm going to say, we asked you, well, I won't be here, so you're off the hook. But I'm going to say, I asked you about what you thought about it. Does it generally align with where you want to go? Can we build on this, or are you going to be doing a turnaround? I know there's some learning that has to happen, but are we in the direction that you want to go? Can you speak a little bit to it?
I mean, my plan next year is a full technology overhaul.
Hey, man. You got my vote. Are you running for select board too? I got you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still getting to, first of all, great to be with all of you and to get started here. And this is day one, so I don't know as much as I'll know at this time next year. But yeah, I mean, based on everything that I've researched and what I know about where Milton is, I think this certainly is a transitional period. You mentioned the fact that there's been a shift in leadership over a couple of years here. I think a lot of the work has continued, and I think the work that I'll be doing and getting started July 1 is going to be looking at all of the work that's been put in place, the strategic plan, which is grounding all of this, and being able to articulate, I think, as you're talking about in terms of how does the budget align with strategic plan goals specifically, that's the work that we're going to be doing as we lead up to what the next budget looks like. I don't see, coming in and thinking about what the needs are for Milton and better understanding them, and I don't profess to know all of them yet. There are lots of conversations to have, a lot of research to do, teams to build, etc. I think the groundwork in this budget will set up all of that work going forward. I don't see anything currently in reviewing all of this that as we come back together again at this time next year and put forward FY25, that this investment wouldn't be leading to the right kinds of decisions in FY25 to move forward. That could include things that as we look at the strategic plan, as we have conversations around the kind of excellence we want to see in the schools, around kind of innovation and things that maybe are missing that we've talked about, that maybe with the 2.5, kind of like the tax reality that has been talked about tonight. I mean, those are all questions that the community at large has to have. It can't happen in a small subcommittee, right? Some of those conversations, I believe, just knowing how this works, 6 months into my leadership will be the start of that, but this kind of work takes a couple of years to really kind of fully flourish. And so I think, again, I think this budget supports kind of where will be a strong foundation for me to come in, to start having those conversations, and then to start to look at where do we want to go, who do we want to be, how do we fund that, and how do we get everybody involved in kind of at the ground level so that there's support for it, because this can't happen in silos, right? It has to happen as a larger community.
Thank you.
I'll ask one more question, and this is, if it's not relevant, that's fine. But I was thinking about what you just said, and I know in the past, every budget is sort of iterative. Like we're building from here, and we need to add this, and then we do this, and then we do this. And if you think about the strategic plan, and has there been, sort of a, for lack of putting it another way, like a zero-based plan? Like, okay, what's our ideal? and then you layer it on there, as opposed to saying, this is what we have, this is where we go, so we're going to do this. Do you know what I mean? And I know it's a lot of work, and I know, but to your point, like if we're looking at overrides every 3 or 4 years, and it's sort of the same way if you're looking at the school. Okay, you could do font bond, it answers this question for 4 years, or you do something else and it answers the question for 6. And I guess it's just, is that something that you guys do or have done, so that, because I think sometimes it is that knowledge of, as sort of Ohene said, where are we going? Like, what do we want this to look like? Answering some of the questions around learning loss, answering some of the questions around special education, which is huge, answering, career readiness, equity, all of those things. Are we looking at it through that lens of sort of a global lens and then building it? I just don't know I'm just curious if that's ever been done.
I'm just so glad to hear you say that, because as a newcomer to the school committee and sitting through the planning for where we are right now in terms of the budget, I think I probably was one of the voices that's like, but let's not limit ourselves to just, meeting, sort of barely meeting, right? Just presenting to you our status quo, but really bringing in needs-based. And even our needs-based presentation is trimmed down, which I don't think that's how you lead. You gotta lead with, you've got to have a vision and you've got to think about that. But I also sort of am respectful of the fact that we have a town and we sort of have worked in a certain way, and that we have a structural deficit, and understanding that, and also knowing that we have these these concurrent needs, right? We have the need for space, right? That we know that. And then we also have our operating budget that those are real. There's a lot. And there's a lot, I think, that we probably didn't bring in front of you, but that were not nice to haves. And I think we're going to feel them by next year when we say, well, that we actually didn't do, we should do it this year. And it's, I think, what happened with ARPA, right? If we had done very incremental budgeting and very modest budgeting every year, then when we saw an opportunity of flow of cash, we're like, oh my goodness, this is an opportunity, because now the needs are even more pressing. But that is not, if you want to be sort of visionary, that is not the way I would approach a budget. I would really think about, let's dream, and then let's allow ourselves to do that, and then trim down from that and come back to down to earth and say, this is how much we're going to be able to do. But I feel like if the appetite is there across the town, then there's no reason why we couldn't engage in that exercise.
And in the back of our strategic plan, you'll see what our goals are in terms of the outcomes. So for each one of those pillars, there are very specific outcomes that we've identified that we want to achieve within 5 years. It's a good starting point. It was work that was done within the schools, but it'd be great to have, Lee's point, where is this town going? And what do we think we want to, will aspire to be? And then how do we fund it? I think that's a very valid conversation to have.
If I just may add to that, in addition to being guided by our strategic plan, we also have periodic reviews by our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So we have, we had earlier in the year what they refer to as a targeted review, and it's a random selection of cities and towns where they look at a couple of standards, a couple of performance standards for districts. And we get feedback and recommendations from reports such as that. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is also going to conduct a what they call a focus targeted review, and they do this for districts every 3 years. So this is information that's very valuable to us. In addition, we are conducting a program review of our special education program. And so we'll have someone come in who looks at the program objectively, looks at staffing, looks at our programs, and they will make recommendations that we will consider. And recommendations and innovations, perhaps. So it's important for us to do that every so often. This is a really good time to do that with a new superintendent coming in. So we always look forward to that kind of feedback for improvement.
Can we, the metrics are in the binder with the strategic plan. So
maybe we can send those around to everybody. Those
Okay.
were approved early this fall as sort of the phase 2 of approving the strategic plan, which is included here. But I know that was feedback we received last year, that we hadn't identified targets or metrics, and we, group of people worked really hard to do that, so I want to make sure you can.
Are there any other questions from the warrant committee? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, welcome to Milton.
I'm ready to go.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. Thank
you all
you.
for your service.
No?
How long is the drive?
It's like 3 hours and 15 minutes, so it's not too bad.
Not
No, I'm
tonight.
here tonight. I'm here tonight. I'm going to be in town tomorrow too. So, thank you.
Yeah.
The warrant committee was all about late nights.
My day starts at 4:30.
Oh, my.
What time do you have to get to work?
Is there a motion?
Work before 7. Down in Pembroke. So.
Adjourn.
Mr. Chair, there's no discussion tonight?
Is it seconded?
Second.
Is there an objection?
No.
The motion carries.
You are welcome.